Good morning, and welcome to lesson 45 in our study of the book of Romans. Now we're in chapter 12, verses 9 to 15. In the first part of this chapter, we were told by Paul that if we were to be Christians, if we were to understand what Christ did for us, then we would surrender ourselves, become living sacrifices to Him, and do what He wished us to do. And then it says further than that we are to use the talents that God gave us, use the talents that God enabled us to be with, for His glory and for His good. And now we're into this section of chapter 12 where he really states on how it is to live like a Christian. And these few verses are simple in a sense, but they have deep meanings. It's important to understand that there's an activity, a way in which Christians are supposed to behave. If you love Christ, if you love God, and wish to follow Him, then it's important to that you behave, and we behave in a certain way. And this was evident from the very first times of Christianity. In fact, in the book Straight to the Heart of Romans by Phil Moore, he writes this, quoting a letter that was written by the philosopher Aristides to the Emperor Hadrian in 125 AD, and this is what he wrote. They, referring to the Christians, walk in all humility and kindness. Falsehood is not found among them, and they love one another. They do not despise the widow nor grieve the orphan. He that has distributes liberally to him that has not. If they see a stranger, they bring him under their roof, and rejoice over him as if he were their own brother. For they call themselves brothers, not after the flesh, but after the Spirit and in God. When one of their poor passes away from the world, and one of them sees him, he provides for his burial according to his ability. And if they hear that any of their number is imprisoned or oppressed for the name of their Messiah, all of them provide for his needs. And if it is possible that he may be delivered, they deliver him. And if there is among them any man who is poor and needy, and they have not an abundance of necessities, they fast 2 or 3 days so that they may supply the needy with the food they need. And they observe scrupulously the commandments of their Messiah. This was the way the Christians were pictured as being back in the early days of Christianity. And this is really boils on what this passage states here in Romans. It must be remembered that Paul is writing to the brethren in the church. He is addressing the brethren, the brothers and sisters in the church, not to humanity as a whole necessarily, but to those who are involved in the church. And it says in 1 John chapter 4 that love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because He is, as He is, so are we. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. He who fears has not been made perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, how can he love God, whom he has not seen? So this is the basis of the way that Christians should live. So we go back to Romans chapter 12, starting at verse 9. It says, let love be without hypocrisy. Now hypocrisy comes from the idea of the Greek plays, where people would put on masks to pretend they were different people. And they would put on masks to indicate they were different characters. And this is what he means. Let your love be without masks, without hypocrisy, without putting on faces. Let love be without hypocrisy. In Matthew 23, 37 to 40 implies that you love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. In Hebrews 13:1 it says, let brotherly love continue. So there's no hypocrisy. 1 Timothy 1-5 says, love from a pure heart. 1 Peter 1:22 says, sincere love of the brethren. Love one another with a pure heart. This is the idea of loving without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. We know in our basic minds what is evil. But abhor what is evil. In Hebrews 1:9 it says, God hated lawlessness. In Proverbs 8:13 it says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. In Psalm 97:10 it says, you who love the Lord hate evil. And it goes down in Proverbs 6 to indicate 6 of the main problems that God seems to hate. It says here, there are 6 things the Lord hates, starting in verse 16, Proverbs 6. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. These are the things it says to abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. Look for the good in everything. Abhor those things that we just listed in Proverbs. Cling to what is good. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another. Enjoy the company of each other. Give preference to each other. Be not proud, as it says back in the very first part of this chapter. Do not think more highly of yourself than you ought to, because we are all equal in God's eyes. So therefore, giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, but fervent in spirit. In spirit. One of the things that we talk about fervent is the fact that we tend to become more lukewarm. As the church becomes more wealthy, more established, we tend to be more lukewarm towards God and towards Christ. And this is reflected in Revelation, where it talks about the churches at Ephesus and Laodicea, where they were lukewarm. God said that they lost their first love, that they were lukewarm, and he would spew them out of their mouth, because he wanted you should be either hot or cold, but not lukewarm. So, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, not lagging in diligence, not lagging in becoming energetic, or not lagging in not doing what you need to do with some energy and with some fervor. In other words, be honest, love your brethren in the church especially, and do it with honesty, with some fervor, with some diligence. Fervor in spirit, loving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, because we have a hope to rejoice in. Things are not what they should be in this world, and it appears they're getting worse every year. But we should have a hope that we can rejoice in. We're fervent in hope, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in the tribulation of today. It says in James to take heart in all the joy, and with joy in all the tribulations you go through. And we have to look at it in this way. There are times of great tribulation coming, and we have to look at it with some form of joy and some sort of hope in our heart. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer. It says to pray without ceasing. Now, prayer does not mean getting on your knees and having a formal prayer to the Lord, or doing a set, written prayer at certain times. Prayer is actually just conversing with God as you do with each other. And if God is your friend, God is your Savior, God is the one in whom you have your hope, then you should be talking to Him all the time. Talk to Him every time. No place is out of limits. No time is out of bounds. Just talk to Him as you would to a friend. Continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, given to hospitality. It says that sometimes we entertain people without knowing who they really are. Sometimes in Romans 12 it says, no one should think more highly of himself than he ought to think. And sometimes we have, it says in Hebrews 13:2, do not forget to entertain strangers. Some may in fact be angels. So, giving hospitality to strangers, distributing to the needs of the saints. It says that in Mark 12:41-44, it tells the story of the widow who gave 2 pennies to the church, to the people who needed it more, even though this was all she herself had. This is the idea of giving to the needs of others. We don't have to give our last penny, but we should be giving some generously to the church and to the needs of others, so that the church can give it to the needs of others, if that be the case. Those are the main things of this part of the chapter. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. This is pretty straightforward. If someone is against you, try not to be too much against them, but bless them. Think highly of them. Think of the good points. Bless those who persecute you, and bless and do not curse. Do not lay them low. Do not put them down. Just bless them. Try to be good to them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. When somebody has good fortune, rejoice with them. If someone has a good health news, rejoice with it. If someone comes into some kind of good fortune, rejoice with them. And if those who are in misfortune or trouble or have a bad diagnosis, then weep with them. This is really quite straightforward, and you have to think of it in that vicinity that it really means just what it says. But the main thing is to do it with honesty, without hypocrisy, and just consider that what we do, cling to what is good, be affectionate to one another in brotherly love, without hypocrisy, without thinking more highly of yourself because you're doing it. Do not be proud. That's one of the things that it says God abhors back in the Proverbs, was the proud look, a haughty look. So this is really the essence of this section of chapter 12. I hope it means something to you. Anyway, this is all for today. We'll try to get back into the next part of chapter 12 next week. But in the meantime, bye for now. Hope to see you next week.